This crispy focaccia recipe can either be started at night and continued the next day, or started in the morning and completed closer to dinner time. Either way, you need to allow for at least 8 hours for the dough to sit in the fridge, and then allow for an extra 2 hours for it to rise. All the ingredients, instructions, and extra notes are listed in the description box. Now let's get started. First, you need to activate the yeast so your dough can rise. To do this, microwave a cup of water for about 30 seconds or until it reaches about 100 degrees Fahrenheit. If you have a thermometer like mine, I've always had success when the temperature reads anywhere between 100 and 107 degrees Fahrenheit. If you don't have a thermometer, stick your finger in. The water should feel warm, not hot or room temperature. If you feel like you want to pull your finger out after a few seconds, it's probably too hot, so just let it cool off until it's comfortably warm. Next, add half a teaspoon of granulated sugar into the water. Then add 1 1/8 teaspoons of yeast and give a quick stir. The one I'm using is listed in the description box. In a medium or large bowl, add 2 cups of flour, 1 teaspoon of salt, and your yeast liquid. It should look foamy like this, so if it barely looks any different than when you started, you'll have to try again before continuing. Now give everything a good mix. And once the dough starts to come together, I mix any remaining flour in with my hands. Cover your bowl with plastic wrap or a reusable wrap like mine, and then store your dough in the fridge for anywhere between 8 to 15 hours, depending on what time you'll be free to continue. After it's done in the fridge, microwave a cup of water for 3 to 5 minutes to give your dough a warm place to rise later. While the water is microwaving, grab your 8-inch pan. You can either use a square or round pan like these. I use the round one because I like cutting this loaf into triangular pieces. Now it's time to coat the bottom of the pan with 1 tablespoon of oil to help the bread get crispy. Spread the oil with a basting brush to protect your pan from being scratched. Before I bought a brush, I just used my fingers. Grab your dough and place it in the center of the pan, and then wipe a bit of oil onto some plastic wrap to prevent the dough from sticking to it later. I'm just using the leftover oil I had in my measuring spoon from a couple steps earlier. Cover your dough and place it in your warm microwave to rise for 2 hours. And whatever you do, do not microwave the pan. When there's about 10 minutes left on the timer, that's when I start to preheat my oven to 450 degrees Fahrenheit, so it's ready to use by the time I'm done the following steps. After the dough is done rising, you're going to dimple it, which means poking it with your fingers. Pour on 1 tablespoon of oil first, because if you don't, the dough will stick to your fingers like this. Grab any toppings you want. I'm using a few pinches of dried oregano, dried basil, dried rosemary, onion powder, garlic powder, salt, and Parmesan cheese. I don't measure each one, I just dump a small pile into my hand, grind it between my fingers to make the pieces smaller, and then sprinkle evenly over the dough. You can also mix up your toppings in a separate bowl first to make sure you don't accidentally shake on or dump too much onto your dough. Now your dough is ready to bake. I've got mine on the middle rack and turned down the heat to 425 degrees Fahrenheit. Bake for 22 to 24 minutes or until it's golden brown. You can also add extra cheese towards the end if you want. To do this, I took mine out of the oven 5 minutes early, sprinkled on some more cheese, popped it back into the oven, turned the heat off completely, and let the cheese melt for the remaining time. This is the golden brown color you're aiming for. Remove it from the pan carefully with oven mitts so you don't burn yourself. I'm just wearing 1 mitt because I've done this a bunch of times, but wearing 2 is definitely safer. Place your bread onto a slightly smaller bowl to prevent the bottom from getting wet with condensation. Then let it cool off for 10 minutes. Here's what the crispiness sounds like. This is what I mean by preventing the bottom from getting wet. The bowl now has water inside, which would have otherwise made the focaccia soggy if you left it on a cutting board or the counter or on a plate, for example. And here's a quick dab test with some paper towel. Only the oil from my fingers and the bread is showing through. For slicing, what I've found works best is cutting it with a serrated knife while it's still warm. I've just cut the first half using this method and left the second half to cool off to test. Now that the bread is cool, I'm having a harder time cutting through without ripping it. And if I don't use a serrated knife, I also have a hard time cutting through. All that's left is to serve your bread. Let me know if you gave this recipe a try, and thank you so much for watching.